Children, Onam wishes for all of y'all. Though everyone is sitting at home and it's not such a festive season or time, because many of the people around the world and even in Kerala, Calicut, are suffering from the COVID 19. So we do feel sad that many of the people are suffering, whereas we are outside safe and secure. No Onam has been celebrated like this, I think, before in so many years in Kerala, but this is the first time. It's such a dull Onam for everyone, though we celebrate or we don't. There's no festive look on the streets, nor in the towns, or anywhere around. Now, how do you feel today's climate is? Is it sunny, cold, hot? How do you feel? Or rainy? Anyway, it's not raining, so it's not a rainy day. And the sky is clear, there are no clouds, so it's not a cloudy day. Well, it's very, very sunny today, and you do feel the heat of the sun. So, today's topic we deal with climate. Now, open your textbooks onto the third chapter in social studies. The heading is climate. Open your books onto page 232. Now let's begin as it says in the book. Please look at the first question in the box. How is the weather today? Today the weather is very, very sunny. So you can write down it is sunny or just sunny. Second, has it been the same since morning? So from morning, do you find it's the same, or do you find there's a change in weather? It's become cloudy, or it's become raining or something like that. So absolutely there is no change. It is the same from the morning. So you can write, yes, it is the same. Third one, has the weather changed in the last few days? Yes, it has. Because whole of last week till maybe Monday also we had rains. But from Wednesday onwards, it has become very hot and sunny. So the weather has changed. For that, the answer will be yes, it has. Now let's go on to the chapter, the first paragraph. Please follow your text as I read. There is constant change. That means every time it is changing, constant change, in the atmosphere that surrounds the earth. The changes in the air in a particular area make up the weather of a place. In other words, weather is the condition of the atmosphere at a particular place and time. It may change from day to day. So today, if your atmosphere is very sunny, maybe all of a sudden by night or early tomorrow morning, it may start raining. So then what happens? The atmosphere, it varies, the weather varies, it will become a rainy day. So the condition of the weather depends on the changes in the atmosphere, and it can happen almost every day. Now, second paragraph. This is about how the weather affects your life and my life in different ways. Weather affects us in many ways. For example, we choose our clothes according to the weather. Weather also affects our daily life activities. Now, if it is a rainy day, you have to carry an umbrella and a raincoat. And when it rains, you will use the umbrella and a raincoat. Now, in a summer's day, will you use a raincoat? No, you will not. You will get baked inside the plastic raincoat. But you can use an umbrella to protect yourself from the hot rays of the sun. And when it is very cold, you will use a sweater or a gloves or a monkey cap to protect yourself from the cold. But you will not wear a sweater in the summer because you will be baked inside that woolen garment. So accordingly, as the weather changes, we also change our style of dressing. Next one, the last paragraph on page 232. Climate is the average weather condition of a place over a long period of time. Now this happens to be the definition of the word climate. Now when you take the weather for not one day or 2 days, but for a longer period of time, maybe 2 or 3 months, that is that weather is defined as climate. So the weather keeps on changing day by day, or maybe once in 2 days or 3 days. But a longer period, considering the weather of a particular place for a longer period of time, is definitely known as climate. Climate is the average weather condition of a place over a long period of time. So you take the weather now, like if I give you the example now, from end of August, say the third week of August or the last week of August, till the whole of September, October, November, it's almost a span of 3 months. Now here the weather will be almost every day sunny, and it may rain maybe some days, but not very frequently, just for a few minutes or maybe a few hours, or maybe only during the night for some short time. But usually the weather will be sunny. Now here, when you take an average time period, that is for 3 months, you will find that almost every day it is sunny and very less of rainy days or cloudy days. Now that will sum up as climate of that particular region or that particular area in that particular fixed period of time. So that is how the definition comes to you, as climate is the average weather condition of a place over a long period of time. So you have to consider the weather for a period of time, maybe 3 months. Usually it is 3 months, and see what is the weather in the 3 months. It's mostly sunny. If it is winter, it will be mostly cold, and if it is rainy, it will be mostly rainy. According to that study or survey, you will sum up that particular region has this type of climate for this period of time. Next slide. Climate also affects our way of life. It influences our clothing, housing, transportation, and the food we eat. For example, European countries have a cold climate. People in these countries eat a lot of fatty foods to keep warm. Now Europe has a very cold climate compared to the climate that we have. Now there you can't be having curd or buttermilk or yogurt every day, afternoon, night, because it will make the body even cooler. So in order to keep the body temperature warm and in order to keep themselves warm, the people eat a lot of fatty foods. Fatty foods means they have a lot of beef and chicken and mutton, non-vegetarian, and eggs, and they have dairy products like butter, cheese, you can say what else, different forms of mozzarella cheese, eggs. These are all things that keep the body warm. They need to keep their body warm, and so they eat a lot of fatty foods. Whereas in India, if we try to eat such a lot of fatty food, it will give rise to a lot of medical issues. So you see now, the food habits of a particular country or a region also depends a lot on the climate. And also you see in Europe, when it is cold, they are not wearing cotton clothes like you and me and going around the place. They wear heavy winter clothing like gloves, coat, sweater, jackets, caps, shoes with socks. They can't go around like us wearing sandals and light cotton clothes. They'll freeze to death. So you see, the climate or the weather of that particular place affects the clothing also. Then, since it's very cold, the schools and the houses, they have a interior heating system. They cannot be sitting in the cold, they'll get frozen. So you see, even the houses are made in such a way, are built in such a way that the interiors are always kept warm and not allowed to get frozen. I hope you understand how climate in fact affects our living style, whether it is in the food we eat, in the dress we wear, or in our houses that are built. Now coming to the next paragraph on page 233. Climatologists, people who study climate, have identified that the factors that influence climate are latitude, altitude, ocean currents, and wind pattern. Now each of this will be explained for you step by step, so don't get upset. Each of these terms, latitude, altitude, ocean currents, and wind pattern, is going to be explained step by step in the following lesson. The presence of high mountains, oceans, and deserts in an area also affects the climate in and around that area. So first one, the first factor influencing the climate is the effect of latitude. Now, effect of latitude. We know that the earth receives heat from the sun. You will notice that the equator being nearer to the sun than the poles for most part of the year receives more sunlight. This direct heat makes the area between the equator and the Tropic of Cancer in the northern hemisphere and the Tropic of Capricorn in the southern hemisphere the hottest regions in the world. These areas are known as the hot or torrid zones. Tropical climates are found in these areas. Now, the equator is the line that divides the earth in the two hemispheres, the southern hemisphere and the northern hemisphere, or northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere. It is the middle portion. Now, the areas that are near the equator are the hottest areas because they receive the direct rays of the sun, and these areas are known as the tropical areas. Like the Congo Basin in Africa lies on the equator. So that is why that area is very, very hot, because it is very closely receiving the rays of the sun. Now, then you have above the equator, you have the Tropic of Cancer in the northern hemisphere and Tropic of Capricorn in the southern hemisphere. And this region is known as the torrid zone or the hot zone. They receive the maximum rays of the sun and they are having the tropical climate. Now, next paragraph. As we move away from the equator, the sun's rays get diffused. Thus, the further we are from the equator, the colder the climate becomes. Towards the poles, the sun's rays strike the earth at a slant. In the northern hemisphere, these areas are known as tundras and they have a polar climate. Please turn the page. The area between the Arctic Circle and North Pole and between the Antarctic Circle and South Pole is known as the cold or frigid zone. Now, as I told you, when the areas near the equator, lying on the equator and near the equator, they are very hot because they receive the direct rays of the sun. But as you start moving away from the equator, because the equator is the line supposed to be dividing the earth into two equal halves, as you start moving away from the equator, the rays of the sun, the strength or the intensity of heat of the rays of the sun get lesser and lesser, and then the climate gets colder and colder. Now, as you move towards the northern hemisphere, you have the tundras where they have a polar climate that is very cold. So as you move northern upwards from the equator, you have the area having the tundras and it's a very cold climate. Then as you go to the south pole, you have the frigid zone and that is also having a cold climate. So once you move from the equator towards the northern hemisphere and towards the southern hemisphere, the rays of the sun do not have that much of intensity of heat as they have on the equator, and so naturally the temperature comes down and the hot regions start to decrease. It becomes colder and colder, and as you move right up to the poles, the southern pole and the northern pole, the tips, it is very, very cold. I hope you have understood this much. Let me stop here. And I want you to very clearly read the lesson right from the beginning on page 232 up to the first paragraph on page 234. That is up to the area between the Arctic Circle and North Pole and between the Antarctic Circle and South Pole is also known as the cold or frigid zone. That's all for now. Thank you.